What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. In this video, I want to talk about the MVP race, the importance of awards historically, and the ridiculous 65-game minimum rule. The NBA is currently facing an existential crisis brought on by the 65-game minimum rule. A staggering amount of the league's top players are dangerously close to missing too many games and being ineligible for awards such as MVP and honors such as All-NBA teams. Quickly, a rundown of the players already ineligible. We're talking about guys like Giannis, Steph Curry, Austin Reeves, LeBron. Those are all top 25, top 30-ish guys, but there's no fuss about them being ineligible. They've clearly missed a substantial amount of the season. No one's really considering them in the context of award conversations. For example, guys like Joel Embiid, Anthony Davis, Trae Young, Jalen Williams, and Franz Wagner, I didn't even bother to mention at first. They're all also top 30-ish guys, but have missed even more time, so they're firmly out of people's minds in this context. And practically every other star is at least close to being ruled out. Kawhi Leonard, Devin Booker, Evan Mobley, and Edwards, Luka, Wemby, Jokic, Shea. Cade Cunningham is the only top 5 MVP candidate not at risk of being disqualified. This has gotten a lot of people talking about the NBA's 65-game minimum rule, with many feeling like we may need some kind of referendum. The rule was implemented prior to the start of the 2023-24 season and was, allegedly, intended to motivate players to engage in less load management. It's no secret that one of the defining conundrums of this era of NBA basketball is that players are missing too much time. Whether it's legitimate injuries caused by the increased pace and space of the era, leading to worn down soft tissue, or just players being soft little pampered baby shits, I guess we'll never know. But regardless of why, although let's be serious here, the fact of the matter is, the 65-game rule hasn't made a difference. Don't get me wrong, stars are playing marginally more than they were when load management felt like it reached a tipping point, maybe a season or two before the rule was implemented. But the difference isn't substantial, and the rule has also backfired in a number of ways. Not only is there the issue of the NBA's best players becoming automatically disqualified for end-of-season awards, but players are now putting themselves at risk when nearing the 18-game threshold. And it's not just because those awards and honors carry huge historical importance, although they do, but they're also tied to massive financial benefits. A number of guys around the league have contracts with incentives for making All-NBA teams or winning awards that can amount to the difference of tens of millions of dollars. And when these guys tend to become the financial providers for a lot of people and their families, that's not something to be taken lightly, no matter how much they're already making. It's easy to understand how one would have been an advocate for the rule when it was first implemented. 65 games doesn't seem like a terribly high standard, and as a fan, there's nothing worse than tuning into a big, prime-time, nationally televised game you've been excited to watch for days just to find out one or even multiple stars are gonna be sitting out. And that feeling's compounded if you spent hard-earned money to go watch in person. That's a real issue, and I get that, but the 65-game rule doesn't fix that. And beyond that, there's some real flaws in the thinking that went into the rule. For one, games played was never an issue as far as determining awards and All-NBA teams. Voters have always taken into consideration the amount of games a player has played and weighed their availability and value accordingly. Malone, LeBron, and Giannis all won MVPs in shortened seasons, but since the NBA adopted an 82-game regular season in 1967, the only player to have won MVP while playing less than 65 games is Bill Walton. You'll hear a lot of people defending the 65-game rule saying, oh well, only one person has ever won not playing 65 games, and it's like, yeah, that's the point. No rule was ever needed to make voters consider a player's missed games. For almost 60 years, not an issue. And this season, Giannis is clearly one of the 5 best players in the NBA, but he's barely played 30 games, having missed extended stretches multiple times. Giannis has long since been ineligible for anything this season, and yet if no 65-game rule existed, he still wouldn't be first-team All-NBA or top 5 in MVP voting. If Giannis played every game for the rest of the season, averaging 33, 11, and 7, it'd maybe be enough for him to snag a third-team spot. voters would weigh out his impact as one of the clear best players in the world, along with how much he's played, and maybe reward him with an honor that reflects closer to a 12th to 15th best player, which I think is a super fair trade-off. If a player misses a lot of time, but still plays 40 to 50 games, I don't think we just need to pretend they didn't exist that season, it just means their impact gets adjusted. Which leads me to my other problem with the 65 game rule. Any specific cutoff is completely arbitrary. I get that if you're going to implement this rule, you have to find a place to draw the line in the sand, but there is no difference between 64 games and 65. If the MVP race has a clear favorite, whose production and impact is head and shoulders above the rest of the field, and they play 64 games, while the second place candidate, who everybody agrees isn't the actual MVP, plays one more game, we all just have to pretend it makes sense to give that dude the award? We get to a point where these things no longer reflect what they used to. The reason awards and all-NBA teams matter so much is it's how we compare players and contextualize eras we weren't around to see. The voting for awards and all-NBA serve as a snapshot into who the best players were that year. If the 4 leading candidates for MVP all become ineligible and the award goes to the 5th place guy, that's just not accurate, is it? If a guy who's normally scratching and clawing to make 3rd team All-NBA suddenly ends up on the 1st team because 12 guys ended up missing the cutoff, what are we doing? And if you need a real example, because I've been speaking in hypotheticals, what if Victor Wembanyama never plays more than 64 games in a regular season? Is he just never a defensive player of the year? Does that make sense to you? Of course, it's not the end-all be-all. Just because someone won MVP doesn't mean they're the best player in the league, and these things are voted on by people, and people make mistakes. Don't get me wrong, I've done a lot of advocating for voters in this video, but it's not perfect. There's definitely some issues with who gets a vote and what they factor into how they vote, but in the context of availability, they've always been able to make those decisions themselves. There's also the potential issue of, what if a player forces himself to play an extra 8-10 games to meet the 65 game requirement and just flat out sucks in those games? Their shot's out of rhythm, they can't stay in front of anybody, ultimately lessening their case for MVP or All-NBA. What's the protocol then? Will we take into consideration that the player's actively been a negative to finish the season, or will we just ignore that and keep the main thing that they reached 65 games played? Because then, what's the point? I want to see the best players in the NBA playing the game, but I also don't want to see them falter in a race to meet some arbitrary threshold. You can say, well, if you're not going to reach the 65 games, you're just not going to be eligible that year, and tell players to move on with that fact, but you know that's not how it works. These awards carry huge financial incentives and define players' legacies. There's the rare occasion of a player who just happened to be incredible at basketball and uses that to make a career in the NBA without ever truly loving it. But for everyone else, they love this shit, and they want to be compared to the players they love, that inspired them, and are greats themselves. Awards are needed for that, and the 65 game minimum rule is standing in their way. That's going to do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leaving a like would be super helpful and much appreciated. Let me know what you think of the 65 game rule. It's been super divisive, as in this season in particular. A lot of top end guys are at risk of losing out, so I'd love to hear all your thoughts and continue the conversation down below. Check me out on TikTok. I post every day, multiple times a day. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and see you in the next one.